This is Chapter 18, Section 2, The Cold War Heats Up. So in 18, Section 1, we talked about what the Cold War is, how it began, how it was this disagreement and different goals between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. And we talked a lot about the U.S. policy of containment and how they really wanted to contain communism from spreading any farther. So today, in Section 2, we're going to see how that policy of containment ended up causing some armed conflicts with communism. So, looking back to the end of World War II, when the Japanese were defeated at the end of World War II, remember this was called VJ Day in September of 1945, they left China and returned to Japan. And now that the people of China no longer had to fight off this outside power, they kind of started just fighting with each other instead. So there was this difference in views between communists and nationalists within China, similar to the difference in views between the US and the Soviet Union. And they began fighting in a civil war in China. And kind of like, who's going to take over? Is communism going to take over in China, or is nationalism? So the communist leader in northern China was Mao Zedong, and he received aid from the Soviet Union because he was communist. They were obviously hoping that China would become communist as well. And they had some advantages. They did have a more experienced and motivated army. So this helped them in the Civil War, obviously. And the leader promised land reform for the peasants of China. So by doing this, he got a large majority of the population of China on his side because this is speaking to their wants and needs. The nationalist leader, who was in southern China, was Chiang Kai-shek. He received aid from the United States, naturally, because we didn't want communism to take over. But he struggled with having an unstable economy and military. So he didn't have the same experienced and motivated army and military, so he had a little bit harder time in the Civil War. And he was also pretty corrupt and abusive towards the peasants of China, so that turned a lot of the population against him, while those same people were turning to support Mao Zedong. And as a result of this, support for communists grew within China, and the nationalists eventually lost the Civil War. So when they lose the Civil War in China, communism wins. Communism takes over the country of China. That's the government in China now. And the nationalists who lost the Civil War fled China and went to Taiwan, this little island off the east coast of China. That is one of your vocab words for this section. And the American public really saw this as a loss for the U.S. because this whole policy of containment that we're focusing on so much wasn't successful in this case. We supported China, but weren't successful in containing communism and keeping it from spreading to China. So many Americans said that Truman didn't help out enough. He didn't provide the nationalists in China with enough aid. And because of this, communism was able to spread and take over in China. And some heightened fear of communism began to grow in the U.S. as some Americans believed that there might be communist agents within the U.S. who maybe would have motivated like Truman to not help the nationalists as much as maybe he should have. So this kind of created some more paranoia within the U.S. of communism.